by introducing. I will start by introducing our first speaker, Luke-Amos Binks, who is a risk assessment forester with the Forest Health section in the province of New Brunswick and has a Master of Science in Forestry from the University of New Brunswick. Luke will speak to us today on leveraging satellite imagery for forest health in New Brunswick. Thank you, Luke. The virtual floor is all yours.
Thanks, Janice. My presentation is a little bit shorter than what we've seen so far, just because it's a case study, sort of trying to leverage what we've, some of the ideas and technologies that have already been discussed in the seminar series. So I just wanted to put this map up, shows the province of New Brunswick and just where we have reach within the province. So we've got a lot of, different surveys that we can use to monitor forest health in the province, but we still need to rely on the aerial survey to survey areas that we can't get to on the ground or by other means. So the aerial survey, really the overall objective to it is to detect damage, quantify the severity and extent, and categorize it to a disturbance agent. You can see our flight lines in New Brunswick are narrower distance in the northern part of the province because there's more forests, less people, and there's more risk to one of our more damaging disturbance agents, spruce budworm, up in the northern part of the province. For that reason, our aerial survey is typically timed with the red stage of spruce budworm development. So when the larvae have had time to feed and damage the foliage, and they sort of turn that red hue. This is just an example of what that red hue might look like from an aerial observer's perspective. You can see some in the foreground here, and then some more up on the hillside, and then even start to see it off in the distance. And generally, detection of disturbance leads to follow up in the field, where we can get crews out and to actually confirm what the disturbance is in the field. And detection of these disturbances is especially important for the spruce budworm early intervention strategy that's being employed in the Atlantic provinces. For those that don't know about this project, the idea is to really try and keep spruce budworm populations low, so that we don't get an outbreak on the scale of what we've seen in the past. So we're trying to detect these populations at really low levels and treat them before they get up above a certain threshold. So being able to pick out these small disturbances is really important to that strategy. So in 2021, the results of the aerial survey showed that we had about 45,000 hectares of defoliation caused by spruce budworm, and about 3/4 of this was in the moderate to severe category. And this was really concerning to a lot of people because we hadn't seen such high defoliation in the province. Since the last outbreak. We were probably seeing, about 2,500 hectares in some of the bigger years more recently. So we wondered if maybe challenges associated with the aerial survey likely meant that number was actually an overestimate. And just examples of these are non-host species getting, pulled into these polygons that are sketched in sort of a tough environment up in an aircraft, and spatial errors, and then person to person and year to year variation. So we just zoom in on this polygon a couple of times. I'll just show you sort of what I mean. So this is a polygon that was sketched from the air, and you can see over on this corner there's a bunch of probably non-host species, young forest that's been brought into this polygon, and some more down here. You can see the red that they're identifying, but just because of the difficulty in doing these aerial surveys, we thought that that number was probably an overestimate. So one of these questions that had been on the back burner for us was, could a remote sensing platform like Sentinel-2 or PlanetScope provide a solution to help refine the defoliated area? And this is just a table sort of breaking down sort of some of the specifications associated with them. So Sentinel-2 in New Brunswick has a 2 to 5 day revisit, depending on where you are in the province. Has 13 bands, and the resolution is 10 to 60 meters. And it's a free product, but takes a little bit more work to get it into a working product. The other platform we wanted to look at was PlanetScope, which is a commercial product that costs money to purchase from the Planet company. And that we purchased a 30-day mosaic from them, which includes 4 bands of the 3, true color, RGB color, and then the infrared band, and that has a 5 meter resolution. The nice thing about the Sentinel-2 imagery is that there's really not much of a wait time in getting the raw imagery. You can download it, sort of the day after the image has been taken. So we were able to get this imagery pretty quick and compare it to what the crews were seeing in the aerial survey. So what I have up here on the left-hand side is a Sentinel-2 image, and basically I was trying to replicate what an aerial observer would see. So that's what this sort of V shape is, and often the distance is sort of where they're trying to survey along these lines. And on the right-hand side is an image taken from the aircraft during the aerial survey. And I've just put some sort of landmarks in here so you can sort of, map yourself out. And so you can see it was pretty promising being able to see the red colors in the foreground here, and even, up on this hill, it's pretty apparent that there's defoliation here, and then across the valley, you can see red coloring that matches up to what we see in the Sentinel imagery. So that was pretty promising, just being able to, take that imagery and have a look at it and sort of validate what they were seeing in the field. But you can also get a sense of how difficult it can be for them to, they're sort of expected to be able to, sketch out, a disturbance off on this far hillside that might not be easy to see with the clouds and the haze, but it's pretty clear on the Sentinel imagery. Although the true color images were helpful in sort of validating what we were seeing, we felt that it would be time consuming to try and sketch out these impacted areas in the sort of scan and sketch method that some people have been using. So we decided to use a change detection approach to measure the difference in images from one year to the next during the red stage of defoliation. So what I have here is an image from 2020, a Sentinel image. So this is before the defoliation happened. And then this slider just allows me to overlay the 2021 image. So you can clearly see the red, the damage defoliation in this 2021 image, even in the true color image. We focused our initial efforts on in the change detection on a vegetation index called the normalized difference red edge index. NDRE was calculated for a reference condition in 2020 and during the red stage in 2021 to determine the change over that period. Sort of uses delta NDRE as a symbol of that index. And we use the threshold of 0 to identify vegetation that was not as healthy as the reference period. We had to do some filtering and smoothing to remove noise and try and identify these impacted areas near the aerial survey polygons. So with this slider, I can just remove those aerial survey polygons and help you sort of focus on the resulting change detection product that we were able to produce. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit on this polygon here. Just as an example of where the sort of the polygon was drawn, you know, to encircle this area, but there's some areas down here that were actually identified with this change detection index that we put together. So it was pretty promising for us. And the new approach lines up well with the true color images and those defined in the aerial survey. Same sort of thing here. I can swipe away the change detection index. So the dark red is the change detection index, and then you can see the underlying, you know, red defoliation matching up in the bottom. The other advantage to this change detection method is you're measuring a change rather than just looking for a red color, and that helped us sort of parse out some areas that were identified as defoliation, but were actually, you know, an unhealthy looking jack pine stand. So you can sort of see an example of an unhealthy looking stand over here. But it wasn't picked up in the change detection because it was actually a jack pine stand that was, you know, just not doing very well and looking pretty reddish gray. So this method also helped us identify 12 sites that we hadn't picked up during the aerial defoliation survey, and they were validated afterwards using the roadside survey. So you can see the crews came in, were observing sort of light defoliation as they came into the site, ran into some non-host species here in purple. And as they drove down this road, they started to be able to observe some, you know, moderate to severe defoliation that you can see on this Sentinel-2 image. So by using this change detection index, we were able to revise our spruce budworm moderate severe defoliation from about 33,000 hectares down to 11,000, just getting us a little bit more precise in what we're calling defoliation. So it was all promising stuff, but it was sort of an arbitrary threshold that we had set. We had just said anything, you know, with a value of 0 or less was considered defoliated. So we wanted some hard data and a process that was a little bit more defensible when it came to you know, presenting this data versus our, you know, our typical aerial survey numbers. So to do that, we did some additional field sampling. We identified 7 sites in the central part of the province. We sort of have 2 pockets of defoliation, one in the central part of the north central part of the province and one in the northwestern part of the province up near the Quebec border. So this one was, these sites were all in the central part of the province. And here we had 30 sample locations and took branches from these sample locations and analyzed them in the lab to quantify defoliation across the sites. And we sort of set out the sample locations to try and get a gradient of defoliation values. And we used the change index to try and accomplish that. Because in the end, we really want to be able to translate, this change index to some form of defoliation. So to do that, we used a branch of statistics called machine learning, or more specifically, supervised classification. And really what we want to do is predict the defoliation classes using some of these change indexes. The four categories that we typically use are trace, light, moderate, and severe. So to do this, we need to split the data into our field data into two sets. One is our training data and one is our testing data. The training data is used to fit a model, to create a model of the split between categories, and then the test data is used to validate it or come up with an accuracy assessment of the model that you produce. And this is just sort of a simplified version of what we're trying to do. So the blue area here is basically the fitted model for one category, and the red is the other category that comes out of a simple model. And these data points are the test data. So in this case, the accuracy is 100%. Because all four of the blue dots are in the blue space, and all of the red triangles are in the red space. So that doesn't happen very often, but it's just a simple example. In reality, you get into instances where you can't really separate the data out like this. You can't easily separate the two categories out. In an ideal world, you'd be able to draw a straight line down and across here and separate out those two categories. There's more complicated methods that are non-linear, and we focus mostly on linear methods. And we were looking at trying to classify these four classes of defoliation. So to do this, we used a Python library called scikit-learn. It's a free library, and it's got a lot of functionality in it. And we tried several different indices. NDVI is a pretty commonly known one, easy to produce with a lot of the 4-band imagery. NDRE we had some success with, and a few others. In the end, we didn't get to classify our data out in a very accurate way across 4 classes. We ended up with a 2 category classification. So it was light and trace. So essentially, not very much defoliation, and a moderate to severe classification. So just those 2 classes, but we ended up predicting at about 92%. So it was nice and accurate, and we were able to really be able to classify, these moderate to severe defoliated stands that we really want to be able to go in and actually measure the population levels to see if we need to treat these stands, in the following year. And in some sites we had previous year defoliation, so that might have, made some of the data a little bit messier and caused us some trouble getting that classification. And one thing, you've always got to consider in any of these, aerial surveys or remote sensing is your capture window and how, weather might impact actually being able to complete this survey. Remote sensing really relies on a cloud-free area of interest. So what we did was we took the available Sentinel-2 images, across a time series and tried to measure, tried to determine how we can still maintain a certain amount of accuracy when trying to predict defoliation. So, our best model, our highest accuracy was, I guess this is July 4th. So right around the, what you'd expect to be your peak red stage, but it was still pretty good within a few weeks, and then dropped off as the season wore on, and predictably wasn't very great early on in the season because there was no damage yet. The other thing to note is we sort of had a 3. It would have been nice to be able to produce a model in this area just to get a better idea of how long we have to be able to get a good image. But there was a period of about 3 weeks where we weren't able to get a cloud-free image for that study area. So it's just these are the sort of things we have to look at when we're thinking about the risk of potentially adopting a completely remote sensing aerial survey type approach, or how we can manage the risk and still monitoring the forest and a combination of maybe remote sensing and some more directed aerial surveys. The other product we use, Planet Scope, as I mentioned before, is a commercial product. We had the budget, we were able to purchase this product. So it's a higher resolution, but it's there's a little bit more variability, I guess, in the 30-day mosaic, and there's multiple satellites that are doing the capture. So it's a little bit more difficult to use, and it's only 4 bands, so RGB plus the infrared band. And what I did here was just overlaid the Planet Scope imagery with the Sentinel-2 imagery, and you can see it's apparent that there's defoliation here. You can see it pretty easily in the Sentinel-2 imagery, but it's not as easy to see in the Planet Scope imagery. And part of the reason we think for that is because we gave the Planet Scope people a detection or a capture window of 30 days, and this particular scene, we ended up with a scene that was probably a little bit too early. You can see in these clear cuts up here, they're pretty barren in the Planet Scope image, and in the Sentinel-2 image, they've greened up a fair bit. So the timing was probably not that great for this particular area to pick up on that defoliation. So that's something that we learned. We also tried to do a similar approach with the supervised classification. We didn't have as many indexes available because we just had the four bands. And we weren't able to produce a classification with NRED, which was one of the ones that we found worked best in Sentinel, because we didn't have a red edge band for that product. And generally, the classification performance was pretty poor. It was hard to there was multiple scenes that covered multiple images that covered across our calibration plot, so that led to some difficulty in in the variability across the indexes and the color values. So in summary, I just have this table, sort of our sort of rough evaluation of the two products. Sentinel-2 was fairly easy to see defoliation visually. It does require a little bit more processing and downloading. This was sort of a one-off project, and moving forward, we're going to try and automate some of this stuff a little bit better to make it a little bit smoother. But it is, there's a little bit. It's not ready to use right away. You have to look at cloud cover and that sort of thing. And it worked pretty well in the machine learning supervised classification to get us a model that we could use. Planet scope was a little tougher to see the visual defoliation. It comes as a relatively ready to use mosaic that's all stitched together and that sort of thing. But we weren't able to produce a classification model on it. So, and it's it's a costly, it costs money to purchase. So we don't think we'll be moving forward on that avenue with Planet Scope. But Sentinel-2 seemed to be a pretty good product for our use. So we're going to be doing further work on integrating this approach into our monitoring programs based on timing of damage. So we're looking at doing a sort of an early summer spruce budworm type assessment using Sentinel-2 and a late summer one to capture some of the other pests out there. And we're going to look at some additional indices that might be of use to us. And there's other research being done using various platforms and methods through the early intervention strategy. And these seminars have been helpful, and some other options out there. So as those come along, we're going to try and take a look at those as well. So thanks for listening. I'm ready for any questions. I think you're muted, Janice.
You are correct. Sorry about that. Yeah, so if anybody's got any questions, please use the raise hand function, which is in the reactions icon in the Zoom window. Or you can alternatively type a question out in the chat window if you like. I've got a question, Luke. Perhaps you mentioned it and I just didn't catch it. Was which index worked better? Yeah, sorry, I sort of skipped over that one. It was the NDRE index. Yeah, so NDRE index was actually the one that worked the best out of them all. I sort of got it bold there, but it didn't show up all that well. So it was the original one that we had been working with. Dan, I see you have a question.
Yeah, thanks, Luke, for the great presentation and for the work that you guys are doing in New Brunswick on using remote sensing to try to map defoliation from spruce budworm. I mean, one of the things that we're always doing when we're doing aerial defoliation is looking at how things are changing from one year to the next. And do you guys have any plans? So do you have any plans to go back and look at previous years to see if you can get images to kind of say, okay, well, this is what happened in 2021. We saw an increase in in the areas where defoliation was detected. You know, are you planning on going back to 2020 and maybe doing something similar, or?
Yeah, that's part of the plan, is to try and do it like a 2019 to 2020 sort of scan to see what did we miss out there. And yeah, so we are gonna look at that. And I mean, I think, you know, that's important to do that work, because I forgot to mention in the presentation too that we've seen the big population decline, so we're not really expecting to see too much defoliation in the next year. So yeah, we're going to have to work with some older data to try and move this.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Luke. We've got a question from Stephen Mayer.
Hi, great presentation. I'm just wondering about kind of lighter defoliation and how well this method detects defoliation prior to the kind of mortality stage or red stage. Can you detect it earlier, and how severe does it have to be before you sort of pick it up?
Yeah, so our, in our classification, it had to be, 30% or more to pick it up. I think the sort of trace to light categories are sort of like there's research being done on trying to detect those, and it's probably going to be hard to do with the sentinel imagery, and I don't know, I think it's in a lot of cases pretty patchy too, so that's a real challenge is the real light stuff, and it would be nice to be able to add that into our toolbox to for the early intervention stuff to get at those populations. But you're looking at it has to be above 30% for what we saw, and when it compares to the aerial survey, it's pretty tricky to pick up on some of that stuff too. So yeah, hopefully some of the researchers that are into this can maybe move us along in that aspect.
Thanks, Luke. We've also got a question from Caroline Whitehouse.
Hi there, Luke. That was a really great presentation. I love that slide feature to show the difference in between your maps. That is excellent. Very satisfying to watch. My question is more around the supervised classification. And you were able to distinguish between the two categories, that threshold being between light and moderate. And I was wondering, do you have any thoughts on what further work would need to be done in order to tease apart moderate and severe?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, for us, we didn't have, as much representation in the severe category, because we're sort of, we're sort of in the beginnings, or hopefully not the beginning of an outbreak, but we're in low population. So, I think we need to get more data into that, into that severe classification, and more sampling. And I'm not sure if the Sentinel-2, just the resolution of it is gonna be able to separate that out. So it might be more field work and better instrumentation, I guess, would be my answer there.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from the group? I don't see any other raised hands. I have a question, another question, Luke, and this is probably more out of general interest since I'm an aerial surveyor. Given the clouds coverage that you had over that 3-week period, and if we're looking at using remote sensing as sort of a complementary tool to aerial surveys, would aerial surveys been able to have been conducted in that 3-week period?
They were, they were up in that, there was some surveying work done in that time period, yes. So, yeah, I mean, having aircraft available to be a little bit more nimble in between those days, because the return interval there was between 2 and 5 days. So there's likely to be good days in
Right.
between that, within that 3-week period, they were able to pick out some days where, there was good conditions. So yeah, it's all part of that, managing the risk, I guess, when it comes to, using this stuff.
Thank you. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands up here. I don't see any questions in the chat window. So thank you very much, Luke. That was an excellent presentation. I love the lessons learned on the, the differences between the two systems that you used. So I'm going to